Hi, this is Vikas Singh from Origin, and today's video I am going to show you the installation and configuration of Microsoft based DHCP server which is running on Windows Server operating system. So as we know, DHCP server is provide automatic IP address to DHCP client on a network which is going to follow the basically DORA process to get the IP address from DHCP server. So DORA process is known as a discover, offer, request and acknowledge. So in this process the client followed this process to get the IP address from the DHCP server. So we are going to install and configure DHCP server on Windows Server 2012 R2, and we'll see how to do the scope, creating the scope, how to exclude the IP address range from the DHCP server a specific scope. So we are going to do lots of things related to DHCP server in this video. So let's start. So what we have in this demo, we are using three virtual machines. The first virtual machine is our Active Directory server, which is you can see Win2K 12 GC01, which is running on Windows Server 2012. And this is my domain controller. Here you can see this is our domain controller which is running Active Directory and DNS role. And if I go to local server, we can see the Win2K 12 DC01, which is running a domain name horizon.co. You can see DNS is also running on this machine. So here we have information related to this machine, the name and the domain name and everything. So we'll good to go. And the second machine, we have a DHCP server on which we are going to install and configure the DHCP role, and this is also running Windows Server 2012 R2 version. So here you can see this is a fresh machine which we have just installed the operating system, which is Windows Server 2012 R2 standard edition. And so this is a fresh machine, and now we are going to add this machine in domain, and then we can promote this machine as a DHCP server. So the first thing which we need to do to configure the DHCP server, make sure you have configured a manual IP address on your DHCP server. So I'm going to configure IPv4 manual address on my DHCP server. So I'm going to put here 192.168.1.100, and I'm going to put the preferred DNS 192.168.1.254. So now the machine have a static IP address. Now I can join this machine in my domain. So I'm going to join this machine in domain. So you can see the static IP address has been configured. So the first thing, I want to rename this machine Win2K 12 DHCP, and going to join in domain. So horizon.co, and we need to put the credential here. So put the credential to join this machine in domain. So I'm putting my credential here. So now welcome to horizon.co domain. So I'm going to reboot this machine to join this machine in domain. So now I'm going to create one user account here for the DHCP server. So let's create, go to user and account. Under the user, I'm going to copy this simple user and make it like DHCP admin, and I'm going to use this credential to log into DHCP server. This is basically, also you can say the generic or service account for DHCP server. So now I'm going to log in here with that account. So I'm going to put here DHCP admin and put the credential for this account. So now you can see we have logged in. So now you can see it's loading the dashboard. So the machine is joined in domain. So now we can go ahead and install DHCP role. So I'm going to install right now. So go to manage and add role and features, click next. And here DHCP is basically a role based installation, so we need to select the role or feature based installation, click next. And here we have our server, and now I am going to select the DHCP server from the list, add feature. So it's going to install a DHCP role, and you can see dynamic host container protocol server enable you to centralize, configure and manage and provide temporary IP address to client computers. So go ahead, click next. On a feature page, leave the default, click next, and we have a DHCP server configuration. So things to note, you should configure at least one static IP address on this computer. So we have already done a static IP address configuration, and we have a before you install DHCP server, you should plan for your subnet, scopes and exclusion, everything. So we need to plan for like LAN, what the IP address range you are going to use in your network, and what is subnet mask you are going to use, the scope range and exclusion, like what the range you want to exclude from the DHCP server to get release IP address. So we need to plan these things. So click next. Now we have here install button, so let's install the DHCP role. So it's going to take less than 1 minute to get the installation done for DHCP server role. Then we can go ahead and configure the DHCP post configuration, and we can create one first scope, and we'll see how it's working. So almost done. So the installation is done, configuration required. So I'm going to click on complete DHCP configuration. So this is going to tell us the what we need to create the following security group on delegation on DHCP server administration. So we need a DHCP administrator and DHCP user to authorize this computer in domain if joined. So our machine is joined in this domain, so we need to authorize this DHCP server to get the release from IP address for this origin.co domain. So go ahead, click next, and now we have a credential for the authorize this DHCP server in Active Directory. So this DHCP service account is a basic. If you don't have the domain admins right, you need to assign some other credential which having the domain administrator right. So this account have a domain admins right, so I'm going to authorize this DHCP server in Active Directory. So click commit, and you can see we have done with this, and both the security group creation is done. Please restart DHCP server on the target computer to take the effect. So we are good to go, and now I'm going to close this. Now you can see the DHCP role has been enabled here, and to check the DHCP role we need to go to services, and under the services you can see we have a DHCP server role enabled and it's running. So I want to restart once to take the effect for the DHCP security group. So we have done this, and now we can launch the tools and DHCP to manage the DHCP role. Now we can start configuring DHCP server role. So you can see we have both DHCP v4 IP address v4 and IP address v6. So I'm going to focus on this video on configuring v4 IP addresses for DHCP server. So to create a new scope, we need to assign a right click here and new scope. So in new scope we have an option to create a DHCP scope for a specific network range. So I'm going to call it like LAN, and click next, and we can specify the range, start and end range. So I'm going to configure it like you can say 10 dot go with the 192.168.1.151, and end is 1.200, and we can specify this length subnet mask also. So I'm going to use the default class C subnet mask here. Click next, and we have exclusion for the IP address. So we can basically configure the exclude IP address here, which is not going to release on the network which we have just configured the range. So you can see the type the IP address range that you want to exclude. If you want to exclude a single address, type the start address only. So I'm going to call it like 192.168.1.151, and the end is 160. So basically what I'm going to do here, I have configured the IP address range from 51 to 200, but I'm going to make this 51 to 60 exclude, like you can say, for I'm going to reserve it for printers on some other network devices. So go ahead, click next, and we have a lease duration. The default lease duration is going to be 8 days, so I'm going to make it like 4 days, or you want to make it like hours. So you can also go and do the settings like 12 hours, 10 hours. So I'm going to make it 10 hours, and we have other option here as well as to configure like a DHCP option. So DHCP option is basically a option where we can provide the uh, other parameters to DHCP servers to get the configure on DHCP client. So I'm going to click it, configure it now, and we have a router address, and we can configure the router address as well as. So I configure the router address. We have a domain name and DNS. So if you have a multiple DNS, you can go ahead and add the DNS address also. Like you can add 2.254 if you have another DNS. So it's going to validate the DNS address. If you don't have, if the DNS service is not responding on this, it's not going to give you the option to add this server in a DNS. So this is the basically the we can add the DNS. So if you want to still add it, you can add. If you don't want to add, so I'm going to not add because this is a demo only. So we have one DHCP DNS address here. So click next, and we can use the wins also. So, and now we have a final step, which is activate scope. So activate scope means we are going to activate this scope to get the IP address release for the client if any client requests to this DHCP server. So I'm going to activate it. So click finish. Now you can see here we have a multiple options. So scope, address pool, you can see we have address pool 51 to 200, and the 51 to 160 is block here. And if I go to address lease, you can see here we don't have any address lease. So we have also reservation here. You can make a new reservation, and you can make it like demo res, and you can type the IP address like 151, and you need to put the MAC address like A B C D EF 01, 02 and 03, and you can put the description also. So I'm going to put here and click add. So you can see the this is added here. So same way you can add a multiple reservation. What do you need to provide? The reservation name, the IP address which you want to reserve against the MAC address. So this is the reservation, and now we have a scope here. Scope option, you can see we have already configured DNS, router and domain name. So if you want to add more, you can go ahead and configure option, and you can add the all the which you want to add here. So we have multiple options here. Like if you want to add an NTP server, NIS server, anything you can go ahead and add here. So, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this Windows 8 client machine in my DHCP network, get the automatic IP address from DHCP server, and we'll see how it's going to work. So for currently you can see this DHCP this IP address is configured on manually basis. So I'm going to configure it on DHCP basis. So here we can go and click the internet IPv4 and properties, and we need to select the opt-in and IP address automatically. So I'm going to click it. If I click here, Now you can see it's going to take the request, and you can see it's taken the DHCP server enable yes, and we have a DHCP server IP address 100, which is our DHCP server. If you go here, you can see this is our DHCP server, which is giving the IP address, and we have a VINs, DNS, we have a subnet mask, we have a default gateway, everything which is coming from our DHCP server. So now you can go here, and if you go to address list, you can see we have an address here which we have just received. So this is the basically the IP address lease from the which is getting leased from the DHCP server. And if you want to make the reservation, you can right click and you can make it reservation. So lease converted successfully to reservation. You can see here it's added. If I go to properties, you can see the MAC address has been reserved, and the DNS address also we have like create a PTR record, everything is done. So this is the basically how the DHCP server we need how to configure the DHCP server and how to configure it. So thank you for watching, and if you have any query, you can contact us. Our contact details is given in below descriptions. Thank you. Bye bye.